We kept the food, the traditions, and the last name. And somewhere along the way, we quietly let the language go. That needs to stop. These are 3 reasons why we should learn and maintain Italian, the language of our ancestors. Number 1, it makes the experience better when visiting Italy. Number 2, it respects our ancestors. And number 3, it connects us all as the Italian diaspora. So let's start off with number 1. To give a little bit of a background, I did not grow up as a native Italian speaker. I picked up the language in my late teens and early 20s through mostly self-teaching, but also I did take a handful of classes in college, but if I'm being honest, it's a little bit easier to learn on your own oftentimes. But I went to Italy a few times as a kid, and I only had the ability to speak the basics, very, very simple stuff. Going back and studying there in college and having this understanding of the language, and then basically since then, every time that I visited, most of my trip is in Italian. It is speaking to the locals in their native language and the language of my ancestors. And I can tell that there's a large difference between the experience when you speak the language and when you don't. This applies anywhere. It's not just Italy. But for us as people in the Italian diaspora, we already have a lot in common culturally, depending on where you go in Italy, of course, because in itself, it's very culturally diverse. But we tend to have a little bit more proximity culturally already because of our background. And so when we go to Italy, when you can speak in the language, it opens the door to a lot of things. For example, you could do tours in Italian that oftentimes are catered to locals, which might be a little bit better than what you get as just the English or Spanish or French speaking tourists. It also expands the amount of places you can visit in Italy. If you want to go off the beaten path in Italy, you're unlikely to find people that speak any language besides Italian or their regional language, maybe a Sicilian or Neapolitan, etc. So by being able to communicate in standard Italian, you're going to significantly open the door to different places that you can go in Italy without struggling to get by and struggling just to communicate. I also feel like you get to live the culture a little bit fuller. When people are able to express themselves in their native language, they're able to really get across what they're trying to say and all of their passions. And as we know, Italians tend to be very passionate people, especially when talking about things they're passionate about, whether it's food or sports or their hometown, etc. So having the ability to understand them when they are, spilling their passions and feelings to you is part of the experience that I feel like is super important. That is significantly different than if you just go there with a non-Italian language as your base for the whole trip, or even, when you start living there, anything like that. And then to point number 2, it respects our ancestors. So most of us had grandparents, great-grandparents that immigrated from Italy to our respective countries, whether it's the US, Canada, Australia, Brazil, France, whatever it may be. And most of the time, because a large portion of the immigration that came to our countries from Italy were from typically poor peasant farmers or people living in small villages, or just far back in history. So standard Italian wasn't as widespread. So a lot of our ancestors came with regional languages, whether it was Veneto or Neapolitan or Sicilian or Calabrian or Sardinian. They came with their regional language or dialect, not necessarily standard Italian, but standard Italian is a way to kind of connect us to our ancestors in the modern day. I also always say, even though I'm not someone myself who speaks any regional language or dialect, I do see a revival in that as well in the diaspora. So all power to the people that want to learn Sicilian, the language of their ancestors, or Neapolitan or whatever it may be. I also think that's a huge part. So whether it's reclaiming Italian or it's reclaiming the regional language or dialect, I don't think there's any problem with either or. I just think learning Italian will help you experience the country as a whole, but maybe you're more concerned about being connected with your paese or your region, and that's fine. Of course, do whatever you feel is right. But I do think that having some semblance of learning an Italic language, any language from the peninsula that connects you to your ancestors, is super important. And for me, that was standard Italian, because my regional background is so mixed, and the immigration of my family was a long time ago, so I don't have like those major regional ties. So I think for me it was really important just to have the capability to communicate in standard Italian, to respect where my ancestors came from and more or less the language that they spoke. And then point number 3, it connects us as a diaspora. So there are about 80 million people of Italian descent that live outside of Italy and 60 million within. So we're talking well over 100 million people combined of Italian descent in the world. And that 80 million in the diaspora is super mixed between different languages. Obviously English is very dominant, whether it's in Canada, Australia, US, UK, etc. There's also a lot of Italians in French-speaking territories like France, and in Spanish-speaking territories such as a lot of countries in South America. Also, a lot of Italian descendants in Brazil, which is Portuguese. So you have all these different languages that people speak natively, even if their ancestry is Italian or their ancestors came from there. So I think that it's super important to be able to communicate as a diaspora if we truly want to connect. And that's what I'm here for as ORIUNDI. This is my mission, this is my dream, is to open the doors to people in the diaspora to connect with people beyond just their neighborhood or their city or even their country. Because like I've said so many times, I think we have so much in common, and it's so cool to see all the different ways that Italian culture has rooted itself in one country, one city or the other, and has stayed the same in a lot of ways, sometimes stayed frozen in a time capsule, but also sometimes changed and adapted to the local culture. So although there are those major differences in language or the major differences in some aspects of culture, a lot of times we have a lot of the same base values, we have a lot of the same base experiences and kind of foods or festivals, or we share hundreds of years of history from Italy, or in certain regions of Italy that came into the immigrant story. And so I think that being able to speak Italian will allow us to connect so much better with other people in the diaspora, because it's a lot to ask to try and be able to speak to people in all different languages in the diaspora, versus already having a base standard language to go off of that connects us all by ancestry, that connects us all by our backgrounds, by our family backgrounds, but now we're able to communicate through a common language. So to tie it all up, I have seen massive changes in my connection with my culture, my identity, and my experiences in Italy from taking the time to learn Italian, or for any of you learning Italian or a regional language or dialect. It's obviously up to you. It's a tall task to learn a language. It's not easy. There's a lot of difficulties and time commitments and motivation that go into it, but I do think that it pays off way more than what you even imagine. It sounds like it's great to learn a new skill and to connect with your cultural background or your ancestors, but I think it has brought so much more to my life than I have ever even expected. And I'm so glad that I took the time to really learn language of my ancestors that I unfortunately didn't learn at home, because obviously it was lost a lot of times in immigration or through the generations and assimilation, or out of embarrassment or out of necessity or whatever it was. Obviously, when you are a minority language in a territory, it's pretty hard to keep it alive. I do think it's great that we have all of these tools available to us to learn a language easier than ever, especially Italian, which is one that is pretty well known and well spoken in different parts of the world. So there's a lot of resources out there. So back to the 3 main points of why, as a diaspora, we should learn and maintain the Italian language. Number 1, it's to make the experience better in Italy. Number 2, it respects our ancestors. And number 3, it connects us as a diaspora with a common language. If you like content like this, especially like this one, unscripted and from the heart, then ORIUNDI is for you. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know if you want more videos like this that are kind of just me chatting, more opinion-based, more experience-based than fully research-based. I'm excited to read your comments below. Ciao for now, e alla prossima.